Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be focusing on Threemium drafts. That is drafts with 3 premium players in. I asked over on Twitter for all of your 3 premium drafts. You've sent them over to me. We're going to discuss some of the different structures you can go for, the pros and the cons of going with 3 premiums, and whether I personally think you should start the season that way. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, in today's video, we're going to go through 6 different 3 premium drafts. As per my previous rating your drafts video, which was released last week, go back and watch that if you haven't already. It's still largely relevant today. I've given each of them a name, and I'm going to try and present 6 very different 3 premium drafts to you, just to show you what you can possibly do if you want to go with 3 premiums. I'd like to caveat at the start of this by saying that personally, I will probably be unlikely to go with 3 premiums. I think there are just too many cons and sacrifices that you have to make, which we will discuss in this video here. But I do think there are some very nice 3 premium drafts that you can build. And you guys over on Twitter sent me your very best drafts. I'm going to show you them today. So the first one is from the main man, FPL Architect, over on Twitter. He did say that he's personally not going with a 3 premium draft, so he's not really going to go for one. If he was, this is the draft he would build. And I've pretty much presented, in my opinion, what is arguably probably the best 3 premium draft that I'd probably build as the first one here. It's a very flexible, balanced 4-4-2. And these seem to be my buzzwords at the moment on Twitter and on YouTube as well. I like to try and be as flexible as possible. I like to build a draft where if it goes wrong, I'm not forced into an early wildcard. And I feel like with this draft here, you only need to make 2 transfers to get this team essentially exactly the same as a 2 premium draft. Whereas some of the other 3 premium drafts, it looks like you'd almost need a wildcard to get you back into a position where you could compete with some of the other teams if the 3 premium doesn't work. So you can see here the 3 premiums are Kane, Haaland, and Salah. I would argue that they're probably the best 3 premiums, but I do know for sort of structure reasons, sometimes going with 2 premium midfielders makes a little bit more sense. The thing I like about this is, right, you get a £4.5 million keeper, as most people will have, so easy switch to Raya, to Melier, to Sanchez, whoever you want in that £4.5 million slot. You still get 3 premium defenders in James, Trent, and Diaz. Tomiyasu in there is the 4.5. That can be any 4.5 you want there. You know I'm a big fan of Dalot, so you could go for any 4.5. You then still get an £8 million mid, right? So you've still got Luis Diaz in there, and I do really like that flexible £8 million mid spot, as we discussed in yesterday's video. You've got Salah in there as the premium. The only slight issue, and I suppose it's maybe a bigger issue than I'm giving credit to here, is having to start Neto and Bailey every single week. Looks like it could be a recipe for disaster at points. Now, the bench isn't terrible. Whilst it is cheap, we've been blessed with Nico Williams and Andreas Pereira. Nico Williams looks like he's playing in a wing-back role, and Andreas Pereira looks like he'll be playing in the number 10 role for Fulham. He's on a lot of corners as well. Already got 2 assists in pre-season from corners. So it's not a terrible bench despite being cheap, but there will be weeks, I guarantee it, where you get Bailey not starting, Neto not starting. Then you've also got the risks of James, maybe Diaz, Tomiyasu, Haaland potentially, Diaz, I suppose. I feel like there's a lot of rotation risk. Then I'm not sure I would want to rely on a 5.5 and a £5 million midfielder, especially when you consider the fact that there aren't that many great options at their prices. And if they were to decrease in price, because Bailey and Neto, especially Neto, will be quite highly owned. If they do flop at the start of the season, they're going to decrease in price by 0.1 million. And you could be left in a position where you've got 2 sort of dead spots in your team and there's not a lot to do with it. And then you need to sell one of your premiums anyway. I don't want to beat down on the 3 premium drafts too much because that's the point of today's video. For me, this is probably sort of the best, most balanced structure you can go for. It doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the most out of your 11 with this. It just means that if it does go wrong, if, for example, Kane and Haaland don't smash it as we think at the start of the season, all you need to do is sell one of Kane and Haaland, downgrade them to an £8 million striker such as the Havertz or Jesus, upgrade one of Bailey and Neto, and all of a sudden this team looks essentially the same as my balanced 4-4-2 that I'm currently going with. So I don't dislike it. I understand why you would want to do it. I think the final thing is, we'll address it nice and early in this video. The issue I have with 3 premiums, or the reason I don't necessarily feel the need to do so, you can only captain one of them every week, right? So you can only captain one of Salah, Kane, and Haaland. The main reason that you ever pay a lot of money for a player is because not only do they represent good value and getting you a lot of points, they're also a viable captaincy option every single week. When you can only captain one of them, I don't think you necessarily need 3, especially when Kane and Haaland rotate very, very well, and Haaland and Salah rotate incredibly as well. That isn't to say that Spurs and Liverpool don't rotate well, but I think that's probably the weakest of the 3. So if Salah and Haaland rotate so well, what is the extra value in having Kane in there, as opposed to downgrading Kane to a Jesus, who might get close to Kane, but probably won't match him, but that might allow you to upgrade one of your midfield spots and upgrade the bench slightly. So I suppose that's the sort of issue with the Threemium in general, but I really like this balanced 4-4-2. In my opinion, if you're going to go for a Threemium draft, I would be looking along the lines of this, but there are 5 other very, very strong drafts, very interesting drafts, which have been sent. So let's take a look at those. So guys, draft number 2 is what I've called a big at the back Threemium draft. And this isn't like entirely big at the back Threemium. And the reason is I'm not even going to present an entirely big at the back Threemium. It just looks shocking in my opinion. If you go like massive at the back, and I mean going like full out, most expensive defense you can pretty much get, what that leaves you with is probably a sort of a 5-3-2, but you're ending up with almost like a £4.5 million mid and then like a 5.5 or £5 million striker. It just looks like a very, very weak draft. So if you're going Threemium, I would say this is about as big at the back as you would probably want to go. What you've essentially added here in comparison to the previous draft is this has Perisic in at 5.5. That could potentially, you might be able to squeeze up to like a Diaz or a Chilwell in there alongside. So you can essentially get 3.5/4 premium defenders in there. What you're essentially doing to get that, so if you go for a more expensive backline, getting an extra sort of premium defender in there, you're removing that £8 million midfielder spot, which I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest. And like I said in the previous video, I just think that having that slot in there will just allow you to jump on not only the £8 million mids, but also the £8 million forwards. You've got Havertz and Jesus as the main two there. You've got Wilson, Watkins, Bamford, a lot of £7.5 million strikers, and 7 excellent £8 million mids. You've then also got the likes of Sancho, Grealish, Coutinho, Zaha. I could list maybe 15, 16 players that I think will be good options over the first 5 to 6 weeks, which is going to be virtually impossible to get into your team if you go with this sort of structure. A lot of money invested in your defense, the rest of the money invested in those 3 premiums. So your only other 2 attackers, so you've got 3 premiums, your only other 2 attackers are a £6 million rotation risk Martinelli and a £5.5 million rotation risk Neto. So I don't dislike this at all. I'm not necessarily saying it's a terrible thing, but similarly to the first one, and maybe even more so than the first one, you've got to be very happy deploying a Game Week 2 or Game Week 3 wildcard if you feel like this isn't for you. Because even if you sell one of your premium assets, I still feel like you're in a position where you might want to sell and move a little bit of money out of your defense as well. It might just start to get a little bit trickier. The bench is fine. It's slightly weaker because I do think that Nico Williams at 4 million is a better sub than Colback. So I think by putting an extra £4.5 million mid in there, I do think you weaken the bench slightly. I would personally be going for the likes of Archer or Plange, I think it is from Crystal Palace, over Greenwood, as opposed to Greenwood. The reason for that is that Greenwood is the most owned £4.5 million forward. If for some reason Greenwood doesn't play any minutes at all or picks up an injury, if people start to sell him as a result, what you'll get is you'll probably get a price drop to 4.4 million. So I would go for one of the lower owned 4.5s. I think Cameron Archer is probably the one for me at the moment. But generally it's fine. I like the fact that you can get an extra premium defender in there. I do think that in and of themselves as assets, I think Martinelli and Neto are both excellent. One of my recent drafts had both Martinelli and Neto in there. I just don't like that they're your only 2 other attackers outside of your 3 premiums. Let me know down below if you think this is a little bit too inflexible, or if you like the idea of getting all of that value in defense and 3 premium assets, and then having a slightly weaker midfield and attack outside of that. So guys, draft number 3 is a no Salah draft, and keep an eye out for the video tomorrow. By the way, there is daily content almost right up until the deadline. Apart from maybe like 1 or 2 of the days, there are going to be videos every single day, so do subscribe, turn on your notifications as well. Tomorrow's video is going to be showing you my 3 favorite no Salah drafts. Whilst I am a massive fan of Salah, I know a lot of people are looking at it, and I thought, let's see what I can do if we remove Salah from the equation. So this is a no Salah draft sent over by our friends over at Fantasypedia, who we worked a lot with last season, still creating awesome content over on Twitter. It's essentially still a 3 premium draft, but rather than having Kane, Haaland, and Salah, they've actually got Son. And I do quite like this, right? Because a lot of people are going to struggle to get any Spurs assets. And we do know that Son and Kane, Southampton at home is an excellent first fixture. They will probably do very well at the start of the season. Getting Son and Kane, when some people will be struggling to go without either of them, knowing that when one of them scores, it's almost always assisted by the other one, I do quite like this. And I mean, this draft actually has triple Spurs: Perisic, Son, and Kane. I do really like the draft. Again, it's almost a balanced 4-4-2, very similar to what we saw at the start. They've got Mendy in goal here, which is the first time we've seen that. I do like Mendy as an option. I just think for an extra 0.5, I'd just about prefer Edison, or I'd maybe drop slightly to a Raya or a Sanchez personally myself. Still got Cancelo, Trent, Perisic as the 3rd premium, sort of, I guess he's a half premium defender. Tomiyasu, again, very popular. I prefer Botman and Dalot, but we will be discussing £4.5 million defenders later on in the week. The midfield 4 is very similar to what we've seen with a lot of Threemium drafts. And it's, I suppose, my major issue with it. You get Son, right? So you still get a premium. You get an £8 million mid, but you've got those 2 cheapies again in Neto and Bailey. And listen, if it happens like what happened last season with Ben Rama, if Bailey and Neto live up to the hype, it's no issue at all. They both increase in price. You've got 2 of the most highly owned, highly desired assets in the game, both at very cheap prices. the chances are both will flop, or at least one of them will, and you've just got to be willing to sort of jump onto another player at a similar price point as a result. Kane and Haaland appear very, very popular. A couple of the other drafts later on, we're going to show you without Kane and Haaland, but they do appear to be the most popular two premiums alongside either a Salah, a Son, or a Kevin De Bruyne. The bench is very, very popular again. Nico Williams, Andreas Pereira, and Greenwood as well. Like I said, just for reasons due to a potential price drop, I would be looking at players outside of Greenwood. So I really like this. It's not too dissimilar from the first draft. The main thing is going without Salah, which allows either a City double up in Haaland and De Bruyne or a Spurs double up in Son and Kane. Either way, I think it could be a really nice option. Thank you to Fantasypedia for sending the draft. So draft number 4 is coming from FPL Ali, and I've called it the Midfielders Are Gold draft. And the reason I like this one so very much is it was really, really different to the rest. I didn't see a single other draft like it. Yes, we've got a Threemium draft, but all 3 premiums are in midfield. Now, for flexibility reasons, I would say this is definitely less flexible than some of the other ones, because if Kane and Haaland do smash it, you're still looking at probably 2... It would be 2 transfers, because you could account for a price rise and price fall due to Kane and Haaland being slightly cheaper than De Bruyne and Son. So it would only require 2 transfers to restructure. I just think with a flexible sort of 4-4-2, having a premium striker in there, it could potentially just be 1 transfer that it requires to switch between those premium strikers. I don't dislike it though. And getting De Bruyne, Salah, and Son into a team looks very, very strong to me. So let's start from the defense. So Sanchez in goal, 4.5. I think if you're going to go for a Threemium draft, you almost probably can't afford to go for too much of an expensive goalkeeper. We've got Trent in there, but this defense is a lot weaker than the other ones we've seen. We've got Kyle Walker in there as opposed to a Cancelo or a Diaz. If City do sign Cucurella, at the time of me recording this, I don't know. If they sign Cucurella, maybe less of an enticing option. Either way, I do expect Walker to start the season. If they don't sign Cucurella, Walker looks like a really... I may very well go for Walker if they don't sign Cucurella. So he's in there as an option. Then we've got Cash as another 5 million. So 5 million defenders. And then we've got my boy Diogo Dalot in there at 4.5 as well. The 3 premium midfielders of De Bruyne, Salah and Son. Yes, you've got Neto and Martinelli. But the reason I like this one so much is if an £8 million midfielder smashes it, or a Sterling or a Bruno Fernandes, basically any midfielder in the game you can get to with 1 transfer. All you would need to do is drop one of De Bruyne, Salah and Son. So I really like this for that reason. I think with the strikers, I think it's obviously a lot more difficult, or at least you need to require 1 more transfer to get to an £8 million mid. Whereas with these, you can just sell De Bruyne, Salah or Son, 1 transfer, drop that down. That then gives you some money to either upgrade one of your bench players or upgrade the defense. So whilst this might not look like a particularly flexible draft at first glance, I actually think this is quite a flexible draft, and it allows you to go with 1 striker in Gabriel Jesus. Of course, we've discussed this before. The issues with a 4-5-1 is Taylor and whoever you go for, Archer, Greenwood, whoever the £4.5 million strikers you go for, they're probably unlikely to feature at all, a lot of them, or just get like a couple of minutes off the bench. So if Jesus doesn't feature, you might have absolutely no striker, or you're more likely to get like 1 point. Whereas I think the likes of maybe, for example, a Nico Williams in defence or an Andreas Pereira in midfield, they're obviously fantastic options. When you go for a 4-5-1, you have to play with at least 1 forward. There are no formations in FPL without any forwards. So if Jesus doesn't feature at all, you may be in trouble. But I would expect him to feature in most games. I've spent a fair bit of money on him and he looks fantastic. So maybe that's less of an issue. But I just wanted to show you this draft because I thought it was really cool from FPL Ali here. The 3 premium midfield draft, more flexible than it looks at first glance, but I still think maybe a little bit weak in defence. 1 striker, maybe less flexible, and also just you may have like a no-show at some points. Outside of that, I really like it. Let's take a look at draft 5. Draft number 5 is, again, just to show you something a bit different. I'm really not sure how I feel about this at all because it goes against everything which I try and preach in my videos. I've called this the 3.5 premium draft from Shackman16. It's got Salah, Kane, Haaland, and Sterling, and Jesus. You could almost call this a 4 premium or a 4.5. There are so many expensive players in there. It is amazing that you can get the likes of Salah, Kane, Haaland, Jesus, and Sterling. Those 5 attackers could be absolutely ridiculous. However, if those 5 don't turn up, you're in some serious trouble here because you've got Dewsbury Hall in there at £5 million. You've got Nico Williams at 4 million, Trippier at 5, Doherty at 5, Luca Dean at 5, and Melier in goal. There are no premium defenders in there. You're missing out on the Chelsea backline, the Liverpool backline, and the Spurs backline. The Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool backline. You're missing out on any of those sort of mid-price midfielders. Neto. You could get Bailey in here if you really wanted to. You've got no Martinelli, no Rashford, no Sancho, none of the 8 million. So I really like the 5 players that you can get in there and attack, but it almost means that the other 6, or at least the other 5 outfielder players, are really suboptimal. I do think Luca Dean and Trippier are actually fantastic options at 5. It's just you're not really covering any of the major defenders. And what I think you'll find here, if you go for a draft, it doesn't necessarily need to be this many premiums, but if you go for a draft where It's 3 premiums plus maybe a couple of other mid-priced £8 million players, and you're sacrificing your defense. We know full well in any given game week and regularly across the season, Robertson, Trent, Cancelo, maybe this season it'll be Perisic, etc. These defenders can and will score 12, 15 points. And we saw it in previous game weeks last season. And I don't want to draw too much attention to last season, but I do think we'll continue to see the trend. We saw in one game week, James, Cancelo, and Trent all got above 12 points. If that happens, it doesn't really matter how well Sterling, Haaland, and Jesus do. You're not going to get ahead with that. So I really do think you need to try and cover those expensive defenders because they're that price for a reason. I do still think they're valuable. You don't necessarily need all of them, but for me, I would probably want 2 of Trent, Robertson, Cancelo, and 1 of James and Chilwell. So I like the idea. I like the creativity. Like I always say on this channel, I try and get you guys to think independently, think critically. This is definitely a different draft to what I've seen before. I just think you're investing too much money into too few players, which leaves the other 5 outfield players looking really weak. So whilst I'm just going to be turning this draft into a very similar version of what we've seen, I would probably drop Sterling all the way down and maybe even Gabriel Jesus to just allow a little bit more money in defense and allow some slightly stronger other attackers in your attacking options there. So let me know down below what you think of this 3.5 premium. Do appreciate the creativity. For me, I just think a little bit too much money invested in a few players, but it is quite a nice draft. So guys, draft 6 of 6, I've called the return of the forwards draft. And it's because we didn't see this much at all last season. It's a lot of money invested into that forward line. We've got Haaland, we've got Jesus, and we've got Kane. So basically going for one of the most expensive forward lines you can possibly get with the 2 most expensive strikers, plus an £8 million Gabriel Jesus. I did see a draft with Vardy in there as well. I mean, you could do that, but that is literally pretty much most of your budget invested into those forward 3. Listen, Haaland, Jesus, and Kane, especially if Jesus is on pens and Haaland is on pens, you could be looking at some weeks over sort of 35, 40 points with captaincy pushing over 50, 60 points. So that front line does look incredible. What that does mean, similarly to what we saw with some of the previous drafts, is the midfield is looking very, very thin. So you've got Salah in there as the premium, but then you're relying on 2 £5.5 million midfielders in Aronson and Neto. I would try and see if there is a way, maybe, if you downgrade Jesus to like a Martial or a Tony, does that allow you to get a little Aronson up a little bit, just to even like a Martinelli or to a Rashford or a Grealish? I think I just about prefer those sort of that 6.5 to £7 million price point as opposed to the 5.5, especially when you've already got a Neto in there as well. That means that Aronson does look like a pretty good option. So does Sinistero. We've not really spoken about these Leeds boys too much, so I don't dislike it. I just think, again, flexibility reasons, it's a little bit inflexible. The backline's decent, but not fantastic. I think the bigger mission in the backline is probably sort of a Cancelo or a Diaz or an Edison. There are no Man City defenders there. And Man City, like I said, I do think will continue to be the best defence in the league. But you do still get Trent, you still get James, and then you get Dalot and Trippier, who I do think are 2 of the better, cheaper defenders. And Melier in goal, who seems to be gaining quite a lot of attention at the moment. I'm not necessarily convinced by the Leeds defence, but he is a decent option. 2 Leeds players in there. I don't know if FPL M-Goal is a Leeds fan, but that could potentially be the reason for it. Still a very strong bench as well. Bailey, Andreas, and Nico Williams. I think you'd be absolutely set with that bench every week. So I really don't mind this team at all. I like the idea of going for Haaland, Jesus, and Kane, but what it does to the rest of your team, specifically the midfield, I'm not as keen on, and I wouldn't therefore want to take any money out of the defence and put it in the midfield. So maybe I would downgrade the attackers slightly and then put a little bit more money in midfield. But I suppose this is the 6th and final draft. So just to say, the reasons that I've listed throughout, hopefully I haven't come across as too skeptical, and hopefully I've still given you enough pros to make you think about a 3 premium draft. For me, there's just too many sacrifices. It means you have to take a lot of money out of your defence, which I'm not a massive fan of because I think there's a lot of value in the defence this year. It means you have to go without a lot of those really good midfield price points. Or it means you go with sort of like a 1 striker formation, which again, I'm not a massive fan of either. So I think if it were me, it would be along the lines of the sort of 4-4-2s that we've seen. Just the key difference would be that you get an extra premium in there, which means maybe a little bit of money out of your defence, 1 less mid-price midfielder, and I still think you're looking really strong as a result. Let me know down below what you think of the 6 drafts presented today. Let me know which of the 6 is your favourite. Let me know if you are thinking of going with any of the 3 premium drafts as well. And even if you're not, just let me know what your latest drafts and your latest dilemmas are down below. So guys, there you have it. Those are 6 of your drafts sent over to me on Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, by the way, follow me at FPL__Raptor. Link will be in the description. Do follow me over there. I'm always asking for your teams and discussing different things on Twitter as well. So if you want my latest views, go follow me over there. Also follow me on Instagram, FPL__Raptor. And follow me over on TikTok, which I've just started as well, which is also FPL__Raptor. Go follow me on all of those different socials and I'll give you my latest thoughts over there. Let me know what you think of all of the Threemium drafts today. Let me know what more content you want to see until the lead up to Game Week 1. There are going to be videos pretty much every single day, so do make sure you subscribe. We're trying to hit 20,000 subscribers before Game Week 1, which is optimistic, but but I still believe in us. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.